Hey Cuprum, welcome back to another episode of Conversations, and I'm here with our guest today, Caleb.
Hi, how are
Yeah,
you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well.
Let's get started.
Hi, yeah. So my name is Caleb Latreille. I'm just a guy with a camera, basically. I try not to make it too much more complicated than that. I was born in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, the capital. Uh, in 1980, I'm middle-aged at this point,
Yeah.
and yeah, I've done a lot. I've traveled a lot, and somehow a few years ago, I ended up trying to take more and more pictures.
So, what inspired you to pick up a camera and start photography?
So I actually have a bit of a background as an audio engineer, and a few years ago in Halifax in Canada, where I used to live, there's a volunteer-run recording studio there. So I started volunteering to kind of make use of my skills and try to connect with people who needed audio engineers. Um, and I feel like I'm pretty good at what I do with that, but the person who ran that studio, Jordan Metro is his name, is
Yeah.
just much better than I was. So I wasn't really doing very much when I was there. And so I decided to buy a camera to just kind of document everything I was seeing happen there because it felt like a very exciting place musically. I thought it was very special and I wanted to capture some of it. But pretty shortly after that, I just discovered all these other things I wanted to do with a camera.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was 5 years ago, and here I am
Here you
now.
are.
Yeah,
Doing good things.
thank you.
What made you decide to relocate to Zambia?
I moved to Zambia because my lovely partner Martha was born in Zambia. We had been talking about visiting here. She came here for a trip in 2018 and loved it. And we talked pretty extensively about coming back here together
Yeah.
in 2020.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that's the year the pandemic happened. So those plans kept getting delayed and then delayed and delayed and delayed further.
Yeah.
Some family members of hers passed also who were here during that time.
Yeah.
And it kind of, I don't know, had us both thinking a lot about uh, connection to culture and family and a lot of those things. And I work remotely, so what ended up being a short trip kind of in our minds became a longer trip and then a longer trip. And then we were like, well, why don't we just move? We both had some frustrations with Canada and with like the part of Canada we were living in specifically. And it just felt like maybe it was a nice time for a change. So,
For a change,
yeah.
and this place is actually better than.
I wouldn't say it's better. It's different.
It's different.
I
Different
think,
is good, is it?
yeah, I think different is good. I think everywhere has like positive qualities and negative qualities, and it's just about finding places that are like a good match for yourself and your own interests and your own limits and like boundaries. Like one thing that we've discovered here is as much as we love the better weather, it really breaks our hearts kind of regularly that we're not by the ocean anymore or by any water. So there's things that we love. There's things that we miss about where we used to live. But yeah, this is where we're kind of committed to being for a while. So yeah,
That's really
so
nice.
far so good.
So far, so good. So, how has your stay here influenced your creative process so far?
I would say there's kind of two main ways that's affected my photography and my not so much my creative process, but my photography as a whole. One is that when we moved here, we didn't know anybody, and so as someone who pretty much focused on portrait photography, I didn't have anyone to work with, and I didn't really have any followers or anything on Instagram. So I just started taking a lot of photos of like things around me, taking photos of a lot of landscapes or houses that I found interesting, just like little still lifes around the apartment, and learning how to edit how to take those photos and how to edit
edit.
those photos was really new to me, and that ended up informing my portrait work very heavily. The other part is a bit more complicated, where it's like I feel like we're both kind of learning what the Zambian character is, and obviously there's a very wide range and diverse range of like tastes and opinions and styles here, but a lot of the people who reach out to me here who for photography have a bit more of a like an aspirational kind of tone to their visual language, which is very different than a lot of the people that we were friends with and worked with back in Canada, who I think a lot of people kind of are really interested in exploring like their inner life and trying to represent that through the landscape, through I don't know, just other aspects of the photo work, and through the relationship that them and I have as creatives collaborating. Here, get reached out to a lot of people who, one, don't know me very well or my history, and there tends to be a lot of a push towards people wanting to like appear in a kind of like not fancy, but appear in a way that is maybe a bit more based on like desires and like less on like a lot of the emotional kind of work that I think my friends back home do. So it's been interesting learning how I want to work around that. Also, I can't shoot in nature here because without a car, it's very hard for us to get into nature. So like trying to figure out what I want to do, how I want to help those folks capture what they're looking for, but also offer my perspective and how to communicate both of our perspectives to an audience member. A lot of that has kind of shifted how I approach photography and how I approach working with clients. What kind of questions I ask people. How to kind of dig deeper into like, why is it you want to like appear this way or shoot in this location? What does it represent to you? Whereas like I feel like back home, everyone knows what they're trying to represent.
What they're trying to exactly.
And why. So
and here it's just like the appearance and just the scenery, want to look good.
Yeah. I mean, and we've connected with lots of folks who like do want to ask those deeper questions. Or not, it's not that it's deeper or less deep, but there's just the language around it is very different.
Yeah, it's very different, actually, in a sense. So do you have to have like a skill to be a photographer? You just like get the camera and just like...
I don't know if
do you think I can be?
I think, well, there's a really great quote that I can't even remember where I heard it, but it was pretty recently I learned it, which is like, anyone can take a great photograph. And I truly believe that. Anyone can take a great photograph, but like a great photographer learns how to tell great stories through
photos.
And when I think about it that way, at that point to me, it just feels like it's about practice. Where it's like everyone tells stories about their life in some way or another, about their perspective, whether they do it through the food they make or through painting or through screenwriting or through photography or through braiding hair or some people do it through like just the way they care for others or like the gardens they grow, whatever. And so I'm interested in telling stories about the lives of the people I'm working with, but also about myself, and finding that meeting point is what is making me excited about photography as I move forward. So you could probably be a great photographer, but it's about, is that the way you want to tell stories? Would you prefer to tell stories through the outfits you put together or through any of a number of ranges of disciplines and creative pursuits?
So can you walk us through your thought process when it comes to composing a shot? Do you have any tips?
Yeah, I don't really, and I'm not trying to cop out of that answer. I feel like a big part of what my practice is as a photographer is I'm trying to get to a place where I think not at all when I'm taking photos, where it just feels intuitive. and there's a lot of ways to do that, just by taking more photos, by like reading, by looking at a lot of photos from a wide range of people and figuring out what I like and figuring out what my visual language is. There are a lot of like compositional techniques that maybe I use that I like or that appeal to me. You know, there's some basic ones, all basic. Anyone can find them on the internet. There's like rule of thirds, or like composing with like a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. But then sometimes some of my favorite photographers ignore all of those. So
they just.
So yeah, I feel like I'm way more interested in capturing a feeling. And the path to get to whatever feeling I'm trying to capture. There's many paths to get there as a creative of any kind. So I'm just trying to learn how to like trust myself in the moment more, and not think about the composition and not think about the setup, but just like feeling in the moment, feeling like not worrying about the past or the future, and just being present with the person I'm photographing.
In the moment.
So yeah.
Actually, that is why we actually take pictures, being in the moment, you know.
Exactly.
And just making memories, like you were once here and then you move from this point. Yeah. Do you also like get to compare your photos, like in a place where you just go and take photos, and then, you know, from getting better, like you want to get better, and then you have like this picture, and then you be like, I think I can do better.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I love film photography, and at my big age, like a lot of the photos, like the first camera I had was a film camera. The first couple of cameras I had were film cameras, and I think a lot of my reference points for photography come from an era before digital cameras existed. That being said, I kind of insist on shooting digitally a little bit. And part of the reason for that is because I can go back and work on old photos. I can re-edit them, or like or just crop them differently, or just see things that I couldn't see when I was very early in my journey as a photographer. And I really love that act of revisiting. So yeah, I like shooting. And then also, while the digital cameras tend to be more expensive in this day and age, once you have it, you can just shoot an infinite number of photos. And but yeah, revisiting is very important to me for sure. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Aside from photography, are there any other interests you have been working on?
Not so much these days. I mean, I'm always trying to be a better cook. I'm always trying to be a better partner. I'm always trying to be a better brother and son to my sister and parents, and uncle to my sister's kids. And I'm just trying to, you know, like approach everything I do with more. I want every week and month that goes by I hope to be a more compassionate person. And a kinder person. And I feel like those are very active pursuits. In terms of creatively, like not a whole lot. I have a very big history. I mentioned I was an audio engineer. I DJ'd for almost 20 years.
Really?
I used to work in restaurants and thought I was going to open a restaurant at one point. I used to manage bands, and went on tour with a few different bands. I used to play music. I used to be a writer. I wrote a play. I wrote a bunch of zines. I used to be involved very heavily in like community organizing. I used to work with kids for years. So like these are all kind of creative pursuits that have like informed where I'm at, and still inform how I approach things. But the way I kind of tell it to some people is like, I used to, especially when I was like making music, I used to like wake up in the middle of the night with like a melody in my head.
Really?
And and then at a certain point about 4 years ago, that kind of stopped happening, and I would start to wake up in the middle of the night with like an idea for a photo in my head, and that hasn't really changed. Like I'm pretty one track mind with photography these days.
So it's just like now, but then you used to be, and it's no longer. It was a phase.
Yeah, I mean, photography might be a phase too. You know, like I'm really deep into it, but I don't you know, I don't know what the future holds, and I don't know if there'll be a time where I'm like, I'm frustrated by dealing with clients all the time, or like, or just or like photography has moved into some weird 3D spatial photography, like virtual reality, and I'm just like, I'm not interested in that, and I don't want to keep up, and I'd rather learn how to knit or something, you know, like I don't know what my future holds, so but I'm just going as hard as I can with it for now, and you know, hopefully it leads, well, not even hopefully, it already has led to some exciting places, so yeah.
So how do you stay inspired and motivated to keep creating new and exciting work?
On the one hand, I'm just feel like I'm constantly inspired by like everything. Like I don't really feel like I have to work at it. I don't know. It's like even here today, like a taste of an amazing drink, and it's like I'm inspired to. This drink makes me want to be a better photographer. It makes me want to be a better mixologist, but it also like I'll hear a DJ set, I'm like, that makes me want to be a better photographer. I'll see a movie and that will make me want to be a better photographer. Or just, you know, all kinds of things like that. So I don't, or just, you know, the way a flower smells or something. At the same time, like there are ups and downs, and one thing that I've kind of been focused on in the last couple of years is the idea that like I don't need to be inspired or motivated. Like I just need to do the work. And that's a direct quote from, there's a video on YouTube with like a cinematographer whose name I don't remember, and I have never seen any of his films, but he's like, just do the work. It doesn't matter. Like I know when I was a student, when I was in my jobs, it didn't matter if I was inspired to go to class that day. I had to go to class. It didn't matter if I was inspired to go to work. I had to go to work. And I'm trying to bring that approach to my photography as well, where there are frustrations with every shoot, every client, not every client. I mean, there's plenty of people there's no frustrations at all. But just my own level of interest waxes and wanes. But that shouldn't stop me from doing this work to like get where I want to be in 10 years. Like I've been doing photography for about 5 years now.
5 years now.
And I like the photos I take, but I'm so curious what my photos are going to look like when I've been doing this for 8 years and 10 years and 15 years. And partly I know that because of like how much better my DJing was at year 19 than it was at year 15 or 10. But partly it's just because, like I said, I might not be doing this forever. So I want to stay focused while I am doing it.
Oh, really? That's very interesting. So as a photographer, you have to be like very visual and and very alert with everything. So do you just like pick up your camera and just like, I'm going to take this, or you have to like think about what you're going to take, like anything that just attracts your attention?
It's a bit of both. I think as a portrait photographer, as someone who focuses mostly on portraits, I definitely try to plan. I try to think about things ahead of time, in terms of like, what is someone wearing? What are we trying to express together? And how does the location inform that? Are there any props? Is there ways that the posing can tell the viewer something about our relationship, or about just, even not the relationship, but just about my personality or their personality? So I am thinking about that stuff, but also some of my favorite photos have just been like my partner Martha and I on a hike, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty. Like, stop for a second. Like, let me do that. And then that ends up being my favorite photo of the year. Or there's the way the light hits the kettle in my kitchen in the afternoon, and you know, someone ends up asking for that photo to put on their album cover or something, you know. So I feel like I try to be paying attention, but I also, through research and planning, can kind of generate images that are just so layered and rich with meaning in every detail.
Exactly.
And both can be really, really inspiring and like influential and beautiful. And so I don't know, just trying to hit all of those bases.
That does sound inspiring and interesting. So, what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced in photography, and how have you overcome them?
I mean, if I'm being totally honest, I don't feel like I've faced any real challenges. Like this is, like I'm a spoiled brat who gets to take pretty pictures all the time, and like, if that doesn't go as I plan all the time, that's totally fine. There's much bigger issues in the world.
Yeah.
So I try to keep that in mind. But honestly, like there's only one real challenge, and it's my mentality, and it's like my level of frustration with any part of the process ultimately just comes down to me, and it's like, am I being a caring person in this moment? Am I being a compassionate person in this moment? And that's not only true of like, am I being compassionate to the person I'm collaborating with? But am I like taking care of myself? Like I talked about being in the moment earlier, and it's hard to do that if I'm not having my own needs met. And that's also true because like I feel like, and other people, there's probably photographers who disagree with this, but like when I'm taking photos of someone else, what I'm really trying to do is communicate something that I find beautiful about them to anyone who might ever see that photo ever again. And for me to take a photo of that person where they seem beautiful in it, I have to genuinely believe they're beautiful. And I feel pretty good about my ability to move through the world feeling like everyone is beautiful and everyone has things to contribute, and everyone is like kind of like a miracle, and every single person is like so much more powerful and resilient than I think we actually talk about on a day-to-day. But that doesn't mean I like don't wish someone hadn't phrased something a particular way. And I get frustrated, or someone is like demanding their photos way earlier than I was like, it'll be this long until you get them, and then they're like, where are they? And I'm like, now it's really hard for me to edit them because I'm annoyed, and it's hard to remember why I thought you were beautiful when I was taking them or whatever. And that's in some ways that's very shallow, and I recognize that about myself. But that's always where I'm trying to get back to, and that's also why I like being able to revisit photos. Because sometimes I have to deliver photos on a deadline, and I'm not able to like capture the thing that's magical about them in the work, but I can revisit it not just when I have more time, but when I'm in a place where I'm like, I miss that person, I love that person, that person is great, let me look at these again and like actually communicate that through the work better. So I don't know, it's really just my own ability to like be focused on the work and to be a caring and compassionate person, I think is the only real challenge. And that challenge pops up in many other parts of my life too, not just photography. So
that's very interesting. So as a photographer, like, do you expect your client to actually understand you, or you just get in there and explain yourself and whatever you communicate, and then you take the pictures and leave?
I mean, I've been told, I try, and this isn't 100% of the time, but I really try to only photograph people that I feel like I have a relationship with, or I'm going to have a relationship with. There are occasionally people who I photographed who are like no longer in my life for one reason or another. Very, very few examples of that. But I generally prefer working with like a small group of friends over and over again than just kind of shooting anyone who likes my images. Because I don't know what it is they like about my images. I don't know what it is about our relationship that maybe we're trying to communicate to each other, especially as someone who works with a lot of folks who are much younger than me. One thing I always think about is like, what is that image going to look like to them when they're my age? And what would the image I'm making have looked like to me when I was their age? Because I don't really have very many photos of myself when I was in my 20s, like probably about 5 or 10. Yeah, that's a lot to do with my own background. As like, I was basically like a vagabond for like a part of my 20s, where I was like mostly homeless for a while and like eating out of dumpsters and like shoplifting to get by, and cameras were like the furthest thing from my mind. And I was traveling a lot in that time, which also kind of forced me to like learn how to make friends everywhere and with almost anyone. And some of those people, like 20 years later, I'm still really good friends with, which is lovely. Some of them have faded, you know, but some of those relationships have faded. But like, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to work with people where there's a conversation between their future self and their their current self, and the same for me. And by the very nature of that, I feel like there's kind of got to be some level of understanding where I'm not just shooting clients, but I'm like working with people within my community.
Exactly.
And in a lot of ways, I mean, everyone is in community with each other to a certain degree. Like we're all in this together. We're all like dealing with this society at the same time and struggling in our own various ways. But you know, we can't be friends with everyone at once.
Yeah, you can't be friends.
And I'm not trying to be, so I'm trying to focus people where like we see that we're walking a similar path
together in that sense. Yeah, that's very interesting. Are there any local Zambian photographers or artists that have inspired or influenced you?
Big time. The Odd Fray on Instagram, Manga Muvundika, if I'm saying that right. I always forget. He's been an amazing friend as a photographer and just as a friend. His work is sublime. He's doing a lot of stuff with like self-portraiture that blows my mind, and just really, as someone who like hates seeing photos of myself, self-portraiture especially is really just feels so challenging and vulnerable to me, and I'm blown away by what he does with that, and also the ways he kind of layers histories and futures and identities into his work. Like myself, he's lived in multiple countries, and so maybe that just resonates with me in particular. But I also feel like his work resonates pretty widely with a wide range of people. I also have to mention Sana Ginwala, who just opened the Everyday Lusaka Museum, which everyone should check out.
Check it out.
Who's specifically doing work around like migration and around archives that really touches me in some like deep parts of myself. I'm half Irish, half French on my dad's side, Irish on my mom's. And in Canada, you know, that functionally means that I'm like a white settler. I'm like a descendant of like generations upon generations of colonialists. And that's really complicated. And it's one of the reasons why we left Canada, because that's like, unlike Zambia, which like became independent, Canada has never really gone through that process. And most white people there have really never reckoned with what it means to be a settler, to be descended from the colonial project. And so, and those are things that I've been trying to engage since I was a teenager, honestly. And Sana's work delves into that, but in the most personal way, where it's not about it is, but it isn't. It's just so layered, and it's really about family histories and what it means to like be an insider and an outsider. Her other project is called Zambia Belonging, which also everyone should check out.
Please do.
And just the way she's able to like wrap all this together into like a super functioning and organized like career is very like breathtaking to me, to be honest. Where I'm like, I don't feel like I can keep up, and but it gives me something to aspire to, and that's so they're very, very big. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention Jeski Archives. Kambole, he was just the first photographer who lived here who reached out to me and wanted to work together. And that's just the hospitality, and he introduced me to a bunch of other photographers. and Michael Matua as well, who lives in South Africa now, but is from here. And the way, and this is very geeky, but like the way he edits his highlights in his photos, just like I don't understand it, and it blows my mind. And they're like, it's like butter. They're just so nice and creamy, and I'm like, so those are big influences. There's a bunch of others. Dana Patel to a certain degree, Sui Views ZM, I believe on Instagram, and so many others that I know I'm forgetting, but like there's a really vibrant scene of photography here. It's really exciting to move into this. So yeah.
And it's easier to actually work with them and have a connection with them, looking at the similarity in the work that you guys do.
Yeah, it's funny because I also feel like my work stands out a lot from a lot of folks here. I think, and I don't know what that's about specifically. Like, these are all friends that these are all people that are friends of mine, but we've only been friends for like a year and a half at most, and that's not a very long time. At my age, a year and a half is not a long friendship. So I feel like I don't know a lot of the references that they have that inform their visual language. I barely know just what Lusaka looks like at every season of the year because I haven't even been here ever in like October, November, December. There's so many cycles to living in a particular place that I haven't experienced that have informed so much of their work. So I think a lot of it is that. A lot of it is, I think I've watched 3 episodes of anything ever on like Zambezi Magic, for example. There are just so many references that I don't understand, and I think in some ways that's attracted people to my photography, but I think it also in some ways is a barrier to why my work. I think there's probably a lot of people my work will never resonate with here because of that. And I'm interested in exploring that as we stay here longer, and I'm interested in like, hopefully allowing that, along with, a lot of parts of my past life to maybe resonate with communities here that don't see themselves represented in those things either. They don't see themselves represented on the TV networks here or in kind of what gets promoted as like dominant cultural life in Zambia, or what gets described as Zambian identity. And those have been a lot of the people I've connected with, and I hope to just do that more. So
as you stay here longer, do you ever think of like opening a place where you bring your culture into that place, and as soon as everybody just walks in, it's you, like you are right there, or like you want to be closed up?
Yeah, no, I don't want to be closed up, but I don't want anything to be that predominantly me either. Like, both my partner and I have a long history of like community organizing. And I think I maybe even said this earlier, but like we're all in this together. Like we are all kind of we're all struggling with like the same forces of like capitalism and there's just so many like shades of that, especially living here, and like white supremacy, and like I don't want to just come in here and have like a white-owned gallery that's totally Caleb, because almost every other gallery here is white-owned as well, and it's like that's not what Zambia needs. That's not what's going to move the art scene forward here, and by move the art scene forward, what I mean is like that's not going to allow for more conversations about the things I'm interested in, about the role of capitalism, about the role of like respectability politics, about the role of like separation of church and state, or like or traditions that I'm completely unfamiliar with. And those are things I want to learn about, and those are things I want to discuss. And me just opening up like the Caleb Show museum doesn't move me closer to those. I can definitely see myself being part of a space, ideally collectively run. I have a long history of working with co-ops, collective organizing structures, like anarchist organizing structures. And I can see myself moving forward to something like that here. we'll see if that happens. We're about to leave the country for a while because of immigration stuff and because of load shedding and all these other things. So like we're quite a ways away from getting to a spot where we can start planning those kinds of spaces.
Yeah.
But I would love to see myself invested in spaces here. I just want to be invested wherever I'm at. Honestly.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Oh, well, that's very interesting. So, what's the best advice or guidance you have received from another photographer or mentor?
I don't know if I've received a good single piece of advice from another photographer.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is because I got my first camera like 3 months before the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first like year and a half of my photography, when I was doing a lot of learning, it was just me by myself, like on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I would meet people to take their photos, but like other than that, and you know, we're observing distancing and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't hanging out with other photographers just to chat because no one was hanging out with anyone just to chat.
Yeah.
But I'll shout out a really great podcast, two podcasts actually.
Mm-hmm.
One is the Black Shutter podcast, which focuses specifically on Black photographers. As a white person who has often been in community with Black people, both in Canada and obviously since moving here, I need to learn. I constantly need reminders and to relearn over and over how to like tread, not lightly, but like how to tread with intention and with care in these communities, in Black communities. And so, I have learned a lot from that podcast specifically, and also from the Messy Truth, which is hosted by a great photography writer, Jem Fletcher. And it's like there are so many single pieces of advice that I've gleaned from both of those that I can't even think of one right now. But like every single episode has like multiple gems of truth in it. But honestly, if I was to tell someone else, I would just say shoot. I don't like that word. Take as many photos as you can all the time. Do it until you find out what you're looking for your photos. Just keep taking photos until you're sick of certain things, and so then you are forced to progress to something different. And you're forced to make the process more interesting for yourself, and you're forced to ask yourself harder questions. And and you know, sometimes to my detriment and the detriment of like scheduling my life with people around me, I'm trying to book sessions like weekly, if not more than that. And I recognize that there are downsides to that. And I mean, this is on top of my full-time job. If photography is my full-time job, that would be nothing. But because I just want to get, like I said, I care more about the photos I'm taking in 5 years, but those aren't going to be any better than the photos I take today if I'm not taking photos constantly between now and then. So just shoot as much as possible. And also don't worry about your gear. Like every camera that we have in 2024 is so much technologically more advanced than some of the cameras that took like the most famous photos in history. So, and some of the most famous videos and photos, even in the last few years, have been taken on smartphones. Or just on anything that someone had, but the moment deserved capture and someone captured it. And so just don't worry about, I mean, not saying get geeky about gear if you want to. I love that stuff. But that's not what's going to make your photos better. Like taking lots of photos and asking yourself hard questions and being a vulnerable person and a caring person, I think are the things that will make anyone's work in any medium better work. Hopefully. And study lots of other, if you're into photography, study photographers. Learn what it is that makes something appealing to you and not something else. Because those details, they matter, but they don't matter in the moment. They only matter when you look at your career and you're like, that's perfect because of this. Not I have to make this perfect
Yeah.
or else.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I have been inspired, and this is where it starts, actually. This is where it starts for me. I'm not going to put it out there, but yeah, that's for me and myself to know. Thank you so much for being here and
Thank
sharing.
you for having me.
And sharing, actually. I hope you guys have been inspired, because this has been really great. This has been amazing. And yeah, check you guys out on our next episode.